Okay, now let's have a look at all the percussion stuff. You will be surprised how much stuff is in there that is hardly noticeable in the song, but I will walk you through all the individual elements so you get to see what we did. Let's have a listen in context. Okay, let's solo that, let's call it percussion loop, that is basically, is not a live performance, but we constructed it with different elements to get, let's call it a loop. Let's listen to it in solo. Okay, now let's see what the individual elements are all about. So we have a bass drum sample. It's just a sample of the bass drum that we had in there combined with the room microphones. You already saw that in the drum decomposition. So this is basically, we took a sample and used it to build this loop. Then with Death of a Dryad, they like toms, so we had to have tom loops. We recorded 2 floor toms individually and just placed them in the right places, because this is really important. With percussion stuff like this, you really have to put every element into a pocket, that it's not getting messy and crowdy and clashing with bass and all the other stuff. So you really have to be careful to put something here, something there. You really have to find the right space and fill it. And this is what we did here. So the toms are not playing all the time, as many loops do. So you have a loop, it's busy and crowdy and cluttering up everything. But we carefully placed every element where there was space for it. Have a listen to these toms in solo and then in context again. It's again direct microphone and the big old wooden head outside in the lounge to give the depth. I don't have any reverb added. It's basically natural room with compression, giving that sense of depth. Let's have a listen again in context of the loop. So it's, for example, it's not playing when the snare thing is playing. It's always alternating. So there's a lot of information. There's all the time something is going on, but nothing is cluttering something else. So this is a good arrangement, really is the mix. So you will see here, I have hardly any plugins or any effects used other than just using levels to put everything in place. The floor toms, they have nothing. I have a low cut and well, a little bit of carving out low end. But the basic treatment was the one that you saw in the drum video. Then next we have 2 crash samples. There's two samples that were recorded here at the studio. Oops. Nothing spectacular. Crash. I also added a couple crashes later on the drums where I felt that I would have wanted Fabien, the drummer, to hit a little bit harder, but in context it was nice. But then when we added up stuff, I was missing a little bit of so we added a sample just to give a little kick on some beginning of a bar. Then we added some crescendo cymbals. This is one that was recorded here at the studio. Just an old crash. I added also some from an orchestra library which sound bigger and have more sustain. This is just ear candy, so there is always some information. You fill up from the bottom to the top, so all this cymbal stuff, it's just giving some sparkle up there, ear candy here and there, something left, something right, far, close, fill up the whole box that you have at your disposal. Okay, let's have a look at the next track. What do we have? We have this is nice. This was actually a sample that Nico, the one of the two main composers of Death of a Dryad, brought into the production. It's a mixture of, it's called Dulcimer Swell, so it's a mixture of, I don't know, a cymbal and a stringed instrument. I don't really know how it works, but it sounds great. It's basically a little bit like a cymbal swell. Then next we have is another little sample that we recorded here at the studio. This is basically one hi-hat of, I think it's from the 40s or 50s. It belonged to granddad of a friend of mine, and I sampled it once, and I like its dark tone. It doesn't sound like a hi-hat at all, but it's so thin, and I don't know what material it is, but it's a very special sound. We also used it later, I will show you. Then, what you probably don't hear if you really don't pay attention is, I called it jingle bells. It's like little bells on a stick. Like a little random pattern. Let me show it in context again. Just not everything very static, but so that you have elements that move around and give put a little bit more life into such a loop. Then this is like a tambourine, a skinned tambourine, which sounds very dark. I really love it, and we recorded a little loop with it just to get some motion. By the way, there is nothing spectacular happening EQ or compression-wise. Here's just a little lift to make it a little bit brighter, but it's basically more or less without any EQ or effects. It's just recorded the way we wanted it and placed it in the room. For example, the next one we recorded with a percussion player. You will see how we placed him around the stereo microphone in order to just place him right in the mix. So it's always a thing. You have to place your signal somewhere in the center, off center. And one way I really love to do is place a stereo microphone and place the musician at the point you want to hear him in the mix. So here what we did is we placed him slightly off center at the distance that felt nice in the mix and recorded this. So it's a little bit off center. This was a stack that we built with some crash or something, and again this old hi-hat from the, I don't know, 40s or 50s, and we made a stack out of it because we wanted a hi-hat-ish sound, but not a hi-hat. We wanted something with a more unique sonic character. So this has a dark, interesting texture. Well, we did nothing. It was a little resonance that was annoying me. And that's basically it. So it's sitting perfectly in the mix. Have a listen solo in context. Sitting right where we wanted it. It's not as far away, for example, like the toms. So we use all the depth. This one is a little bit more up front. The toms are further away. So if you want to create an interesting mix, you need depth and space, and this is by placing some things more up front, some farther away, some extremely to the left, some in the center. We fill up the whole box. Next thing is a shaker. Actually, Nico is one of the two main guys of Death of a Dryad. He doesn't like shakers, but I sneaked one in anyway. And this is actually a big rainmaker that you usually use to make like a rain sound, but I love the thickness of its sound as a shaker. Lovely, and it's yeah, so it's very subtle in the mix. So we didn't want that 80s shaker aesthetic. Nico doesn't like that, and I totally agree with him. But here it's like you put like just a tiny bit of spice, and it's just filling a nice little pocket that was available for this sound. Speaking of the rainmaker, I sneaked in another little bit, just an accent here and there. Have a listen at this. It creates some motion in the groove, which I really love. Have a listen in the mix. Very subtle, but it's ear candy for the attentive listener. So if you listen to the song for 100th time, there is still something to discover. I really love stuff like this. Then some tambourine hits that we recorded here. It's again the same dark sounding tambourine that we used before, but recorded individual hits and just played it as a loop. Next thing is I called it goat snare. We wanted a snarey thing that's playing where you would usually play the snare, but we didn't want an old snare sound. We tried a snare without the actual snares, but for this part it was not quite it. So we ended up using, I called it the goat snare because it's, I don't know if it's goat skin, but it surely looked like some, I think it was some African drums that had just the right texture that we needed. Have a listen at it. In context. And this stacked with these tambourine hits makes a snarey kind of thing. So you get bottom end, you get some mids, and you get some sparkle. So you have a snare without having a snare. It's so much more interesting than, yeah, a plain old snare. Then we had exactly four hits of frame drum that are placed in an interesting way. I show you the part in the song. And what I did is I carved out space in the bass to be able to make that frame drum audible. Let's have a listen at it individually. So it's right in the region that you would usually have your bass note play. So if I would leave both of them at the same time, it would just be a complete mess. So what I did is I muted the bass and faded it in as the sustain of the frame drum went away, so that we could take the fullness of the sound without having a complete mess. Have a listen at both together. In context. Most of the times when I'm mixing, it's like I don't know, at least 50% it's editing in this way. It's like making space without touching EQs. You have two things that fight for attention. So let's try a way to feature both, but without them coming in a way. And I don't want the frame drum to be thin, so let's keep it thick. I don't want the bass to be thin, so let's move them apart in time and not in frequency, which is a great way to get both. Then the song is called Le Roi a fait battre Tambour. Tambour is a drum, basically, the French word for drum. And we talked about recording that drum earlier. So now let's have a listen to what it sounds like. This is basically in the instrumental parts. It's our main drum. Let's have a listen to it. It's like the king is gathering the people and he lets the drum be played for the people to know that they have to gather for him to have a look at the ladies. So what did we do to this drum? First of all, I send it to the drum bus, so it gets all that nice parallel compression that we talked about in the drum mixing video. Let's have a look at the individual. I had a close mic, just like an Aston Spirit. I think it was a large diaphragm condenser up close to get a little bit punch. And then we had again the room mic moved out into the lounge to get depth and more space. Yeah, not to move it further back in the room. Let's have a listen to the close mic first. There you get the meat. What did I use? I had I boosted sustain because it was a pretty dry sound. It's more like pok pok, but we wanted to cut through the mix, and you need sustain and more tone. Let me put this in and out. Without. Just add sustain and it helps cut through the mix, because if it's just making pak pak pak, you lose it in the mix. Then what I did is this is let's call it the brother of Soothe. It's from the same company. It's a wonderful product. It's again a transient shaping tool where you can decide with which frequency you want to boost the transients on and which you want to cut. Here I decided to remove some of the attack because it was just too clicky. I heard pak 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 in the mix, but you need sustain and less transient to let it sit well in the mix. Let me show you what this does. You see ducking away the attack. And with, it's more mellow. And this in combination, if I bypass the two transient things, it's more dramatic. And with both engaged, it's more like, it's more rounder sound and it's moving naturally. If you place the source further away to you, you lose some of the attack. It's getting more diffuse sounding. And this is what I try to emulate, getting more diffuse sound and move it naturally away without having to use excessive reverb. I added some reverb on top. Let me cut it out to see what it sounds dry. Completely dry, and this is the room mic. Let's have a look at the room mic that was placed outside the recording room in the lounge. Let me cut out the reverb so you hear it natural. Very far away with reverb. So it's really moving away and both blend nicely together. It just sits there as if we recorded it in a really large room. These are really nice tricks, shaping transients, moving microphones in the hallway or something, and just get natural depth without using tons of reverb. Let's have a look what we did at the room microphones. I suspect it's very similar to what we did to the drum room mics. Some EQing. This is without EQ. It's very woody and boxy, but I wanted to keep just the low end without all the other stuff. So you hear it's a pretty dramatic difference. And then again, some transient designer, removing all the attack or as much as I could, boosting the sustain as much as I could. This one is also pretty dramatic. Hoppa. It's just so small, it doesn't have a lot of sustain. With, can you feel how it's moving further away from the listener? This this is all I wanted to do, move it away as far as I could. Then the limiter is doing nothing. It's just boosting some gain. That's more or less it. This is all the treatment on the percussion. And then, yeah, going nicely to this, I think most of the percussion is going to the drum bass too. So we get this nice flavor of parallel compression, just making it more spicy and more interesting. That's it. See you for the next instruments. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more, then subscribe to the channel, and if you need help with your production, check out the link to Tidalwave Studio in the description below. See you!